It's a new day, new episode. Hey guys, welcome to a brand new episode of Higurashi When They Cry. It's your boy Karagol Gaming, and you know how we do things around here. Now listen up, man. If there was one episode that you needed to watch before this one, it's most likely the previous episode. Now, every single one of them are important because they're building towards something, but if you haven't seen last episode, you should probably go do so before watching this one, because some shit popped off. And hey, I can hear you in the corner saying, but Karagol, I would love to, but that episode is 2 hours long. Bitch, it was 2 hours for me too. And it was basically just internal monologue from Keiichi, so I was ready to tap out at the end of it, okay? But it's important. So go peep it. We won't wait for you, but you can catch up when you got time, alright? For the rest of us, we're gonna continue on with chapter 11, I believe it is, of arc 3. Let's see the aftermath of our actions. At first, I thought it was a dream. I was staring at this strange sheet, not really understanding what it was. That was all. I didn't go after it, nor did I ridicule it. The fact was that the boring view was the ceiling of my own room, but I didn't realize that for a fairly long time. Yes, I thought I had been dreaming, but I had actually been staring at the ceiling the whole time. Lethargy induced by the voices of the cicadas. Even after I realized I was awake, I couldn't draw forth the energy to sit up. Everything I could see, everything I could hear, everything was like a television broadcast that had already ended. It was hot. So hot, I could choke on the heat. My back was moist with night sweats, and it felt gross. Unable to endure it any longer, I tossed in my futon, and finally, blood started coursing through my brain. I lazily recalled the long day I had yesterday. The reality, as I lay here listening to the voices of the cicadas, and yesterday, so different from it. In order to kill Satoko's uncle, I had rehearsed, formulated a plan, and dug a hole. It was very hot, and I was tired, wasn't I? And when evening came, I went to school and called him out on the phone. I panicked for a moment when he asked where the police station was, but it worked out. And then I awaited him and swooped down. I couldn't remember anymore what sort of emotions I had let control my body. In any case, it didn't go smoothly, but I did it. It was very hard to dig the hole for the body. That feel of the rain pelting down on me, I don't think I will ever forget it. The rain, the mud, and the sprays of blood. The sensation of floundering in a swamp. When I met Takano-san on the way home, that wasn't good, no matter how I interpreted it. It was the most misfortunate and uncalculated thing that had happened that night. Everything would have been perfect if only I hadn't encountered her. I was just riding my bike with my shovel in one hand through the downpour, utterly soaked. There was no way someone could surmise I was a murderer burying a body just from that information. Now that I was thinking calmly, napping under the morning sun, that's what I thought. Still, the more I think about Takano-san's eyes, it seemed like she understood. Takano-san, she knew that I had killed someone, buried them, and that I had been on my way home, exhausted. Takano-san wouldn't gain anything from selling me out to the police, but that didn't mean I could feel at ease. I had crossed such a bridge to get my tranquil life back, and I had finally achieved it as a result. But for now, for the rest of my life, for all the tranquil days starting today, I would have to live in fear of when they could suddenly end. I may have twisted my ankle, dulled from total exhaustion. The fact that I couldn't make the snap judgment I needed to, I regretted it more and more as time went on. You didn't have a choice, Keiichi Maibara. You didn't have any choice at the time. You were tired. You were a mess. Even if you had made the decision, you might not have been able to kill her. She might have been just beating you instead. You lived because she let you live. In that sense, parting ways uneventfully could have been the safer option. No matter how sharp Takano-san's intuition was, she had no proof. Her suspecting me didn't amount to evidence by itself.
理屈じゃ分かってるさ。でも、だからって何の心配もないってわけじゃないだろう。
Just worry about it when the time comes. Now isn't the time to be worrying. It's the time to be smiling, right? You accomplished so much just to gain a new life starting today, didn't you? Then you should be happy at this new morning. If remembering the past is too hard for you, then just consider everything up to yesterday as having never happened. You said so yourself. You would bury it all like it never happened. Well, your wish came true. Everything before yesterday had never happened. So be happy, Keiichi Maibara.
Why?
I stuck up my hands lazily. It felt a little silly for me to be the one doing it. I heaved a sigh from deep in my belly. That sigh got my lungs moving. It felt like I hadn't been breathing until just now. It wasn't enough to admonish myself over. All the dice that could be thrown had already been, and the numbers that turned up weren't bad at all. If I lost with those numbers, then I would just have to give up, I guess. I grabbed the chest of my pajamas and flapped it back and forth. Cool air flowed over my sweating body. Okay. Nothing before yesterday happened. Nothing. Nothing at all. I would forget it all. Yesterday was all a dream, baby. What time was it? About midday? Getting myself up and going to school this late seemed kind of absurd, but I needed to go. I felt like going to school would be the first step to my peaceful new life. I didn't care how late it was, I would go. I would go to school right now and get back to the life I had retaken as soon as I could. My lazy body immediately became lighter at the thought. I rolled up out of the futon, bounced onto my knees, and leaped upright.
10.0
I stuck out my chest with pride at my gymnast-like pose, then took a deep breath of fresh air. The brisk morning air had been gone for a while, replaced by the crisp air of summer. Downstairs, I got a stern talking to by my mother. Hey, where were you last night? When did you come back? You need to tell me you won't be home for dinner. Things like that. But considering the importance of what I had accomplished yesterday, a little scolding was no problem. In fact, it even felt like the sort of thing that would happen in such a peaceful life. I listened with an irresponsible smile and stepped out into the sun high overhead. It was around the time lunch break would be ending. Everyone would probably be worrying about me. I didn't go to the festival and now I wasn't at school. Don't you think it's a little weird how you weren't called out to the festival at all? Like, your group of friends, they're usually some persistent motherfuckers, right? But none of them insisted that you should join them. Do you think they're maybe sick of you or they can't tolerate you at your current levels? Well, maybe they weren't too worried about it. Since they would have gotten a small piece of news, but a happy one from Satoko today. Yes, the small piece of news that her uncle hadn't come home last night. Satoko would probably live her days in nervous tension for a while, thinking he might still come home. But eventually, those days would end. And finally, Satoko too would realize her uncle was never coming back. And then, Rika-chan would quietly invite her. She would say, "You can live with me again." And everything would be back to normal. Our lives would go back to how they were before that man appeared. Satoko would start wearing that extraordinary smile, complete with those protruding canines, and fool everyone with those traps she was so proud of. I would probably be her first target out of everyone, but I wouldn't be mad. In fact, I might actually shed tears of joy at the return of something so normal. Satoko, she would gradually grow back into that meddlesome personality of hers. I mean, my lack of useful life skills were already completely exposed. I wondered if I would ever be a match for Satoko. But that would be such a pleasant thing to see too. And with such warm, fuzzy predictions, I didn't feel so bad for going to school so late. In fact, I wanted to run there now to get there as soon as I could. Instead, I decided to savor the peacefulness of just going to school like normal without running. The world I had obtained for myself, that gave me joy just by walking like this. Yes, the world beginning on this very day was something I had won. Without that monumental feat yesterday, I would have never been able to come to school so cheerfully today. The school gate came into sight. Just then, I heard the principal ringing the bell to mark the end of the lunch break. It was a clear, refreshing sound. I stopped despite myself and let myself take it in. Tap. I had stopped suddenly, so there was an extra footstep. With a noise, the blessedness I was feeling throughout my whole body withdrew into any pore it could find. And as if to replace it, I felt like hundreds of hairy caterpillars were climbing up on my feet. I turned back, but of course, nobody was there. A single footstep could have easily been my imagination, but the footstep felt so ominous. That extra footstep I had heard, after seeing Takano-san off last night, with everything that happened on that insane night, I didn't mind something like that happening once. It had been one hell of a night after all. In fact, having just one hallucination was pretty fortunate. But those footsteps should have ended with yesterday, so if I heard them again today, there was really only one thing it could have meant. Last night still wasn't over. It was still going. Still, that insane night, forever. The step I heard, just that one extra footstep, was quietly ridiculing the nonsensical notion that the world starting today was completely different from the one that ended yesterday. My classmates playing in the schoolyard all vanished inside like the tide going out. When I approached the school, it felt like that warm and fuzzy scene had ended, and it didn't feel good. At the entrance, I took a quick look in everyone's shoe boxes. Satoko Hojo, she was here. Mion was here too, and Rena of course. Even Rika-chan was here. Tomita-kun and Okumura-kun were here. In fact, I didn't see any missing classmates. If there were shoes missing, they would have to be my own. I took my shoes off and stuck them in, and then took out some slippers. There wasn't a single pair left in the shoe boxes anymore. With that, they returned to their rightful state. But as I stepped onto the wooden floor, I noticed there was just one pair of slippers left. Huh? Whose?
Hojo Satoshi.
Satoshi, who had never been to school since disappearing last year. Until now, we had committed the exact same act of violence, but I guess in the very end, it went differently. The interesting thing is, during the last chapter, there was actually some grunting or some voice acting for Satoshi done, right? You couldn't make it to school, but here I am. I didn't repeat the same mistake you made. I wasn't about to let myself feel superior about that. In fact, I felt an odd sense of familiarity with him. A misfortunate bond with someone I had never met due to following the same fate. I headed down the hallway towards the usual classroom. It felt like it had been a whole year since coming here. Hey, did you forget Keiichi Maibara? Satoshi Hojo didn't really disappear on the night of Watanagashi, did he? Satoshi Hojo disappeared a few days later. On Satoko's birthday, if I was right. I didn't know what day that was, but I couldn't say for sure I had avoided Satoshi's failure unless I remained here past that day. I was still living in that night of insanity. The teacher still hadn't come to the classroom. The other door clattered open, the one the teacher wouldn't use, so everyone turned at once to see who had arrived. Everyone looked pretty vacant. Suppose I'll greet them.
Ohayo, Shokun. Demukae gokurou de aru zo yo.
Silence. When I started to think I had fallen flat, someone finally started laughing for me.
Ohayo, Kei-chan. ケイさんも飛ばしてるね。
You're not gonna ask me why I'm late?
飛ばしてるね。
Something's amiss.
ケイチくん、まだお祭り気分が抜けてないのかもしれない。はう。
Hearing Mion and Rena's cheerful voices made me realize how dumb those dark feelings I had been feeling at the entrance really were.
おいおい、お祭り気分ってそもそも俺
At the festival at all? Remember? Before I could say that, Rika-chan smiled at me.
ケイチはちゃんと僕の演舞見ててくれましたですか？うん、ちゃんと見てたよ。あんなにいっぱい拍手してくれてたのに、リカちゃん気づかなかったのかな？
ケイちゃんにシオンのやつがちょっかい出してきたのを無視してね。はははは。シオンざまあなかった。ああ、いい気分。
Mion starts laughing at the memory as she slaps me a few times on the back.
それであの射的屋の対決って結局どうなったんですか？
Tomita-kun was facing me and talking. There was nobody behind me. That meant he was talking to me?
あれは結局富田家がビリだったのですよ。みんなで楽しく罰ゲームをしましたです。
That's interesting you would say that. Tomitake turned up dead last.
リカちゃんも実質ビリみたいなもんだったじゃない。あそこで起死回生の大技でガムをゲットとはさすがは我が部の部員。
So far, the events are identical to Chapter 1's, Arc 1's.
見事だったよ。
Crying at a time like that is a feat only Furude would be allowed to do, said Okumura-kun, breathing heavily from his nose. In my direction. Everyone laughed. If anyone but Rika-chan had done it, it would have been against the rules. Rika-chan gave one of her Nipa smiles as she listened to it. In my direction. Rena too turned to me. No, turned towards me. And then, with a somewhat embarrassed smile, she whispered to me so only I could hear.
でも本当にありがとね、ケイチくん。
もう何がだよ。
あのでっかいぬいぐるみ、すっごく嬉しかった。大事に枕元に置いてるんだよ。ちゃんと寝る前にお休みのキスしちゃった。はう。
The class laughed at that, cheering and jeering. This whole time, the conversation had been a little off. I wasn't quite getting it.
ぬいぐるみがどうしたって？
どうしたって、昨日のお祭りでみんなで頑張って落としたよ。でっかいぬいぐるみ。でっかいぬいぐるみ。
Rena seemed taken aback, but when she answered, she did it with a smile.
なかなか倒せないから額を狙ったり、素早く何発も撃ったりしていろいろと試したんだよね。それでケイチくん、鉄砲を何丁もあらかじめ用意して素早く撃ってみせてくれたんだよね。かっこよかった。はう。
Wait, who was this?
あの後の飲み会でさ、町内会の会長連中にもケイちゃんの評判すごく良かったんだよ。ケイちゃんの売り工場に惚れたって騒いでたのは子供会の君吉徳蔵会長だったかな。次の祭りではぜひケイちゃんに何店舗か任せたいって言ってた。
徳蔵はお祭りの実行委員会の模擬店部長さんなのです。
My brother-son is great at making things sound good, isn't he? Yep, whenever he talks about something, it seems a lot better than it actually is. You can't say that.
ケイチくんって売り子さんの才能があるんだね。きっとバナナの叩き売りとかやったら上手だと思うよ。
さっきから何の話だよ。だいたい俺
Didn't go to the festival in the first place. I swallowed those words. I didn't know exactly why, but in Hinamizawa, this is what happened. Yesterday, during the Tatarigoroshi festival, Keiichi Maibara had appeared, and he had romped about with all the usual members of his club. He made a big scene at a few of the stalls, snatched a few sticks of takoyaki and okonomiyaki in his glee, rating each of them as delicious or terrible to get everyone excited. And they had seen a gigantic stuffed animal at the target practice game, and everyone went after it. And then I got a whole bunch of the cork guns, firing them in rapid succession, throwing each one away after using it. And admirably, I shot down the biggest stuffed animal there. And then, I gave the stuffed animal the proof of my victory to Rana as a gift. So I had my alibi, we're good. Then our fun came to a close as we had to go see Rika-chan's offertory dance. There was a ton of people squeezed in there, and we all got separated. But we each managed to get into good positions to cheer Rika-chan on from. Then, in the middle, when Shion came up and asked me to go hang out with her instead of watching the dedication dance, I refused and stayed put, watching the dance until the very end. But who? Who was that? Well, everyone has been saying it, haven't they? Keiichi Maibara. I had an urge to yell in anger at my classmates for having so much fun talking about the festival yesterday with quote-unquote Keiichi Maibara. What the hell? What the hell are you guys talking about? Far stronger than that feeling, though, was the sheer uncanny nature of this reality I couldn't understand. A Keiichi Maibara who wasn't me was in Hinamizawa yesterday. As I threw away my humanity, turned into a demon, and was busy beating Satoko's uncle to death, I was having a great time at the festival last night. What the fuck? I had to suffer through so much, desperately holding back tears, getting so worn out in that downpour, digging holes, chasing, beating, killing, and burying. Who was this Keiichi Maibara who had ignored me so and spent such a fun, carefree time at the festival, damn it? Who the hell stood in for me as I put my life on the line, working so hard to achieve this treasure-like everyday life, huh? If there was another Keiichi Maibara besides me, then what was I? On the night of Tatarigoroshi, where one died and one disappeared, in accordance with Oyashiro-sama's curse, there was only a demon who had killed someone. Dumbfounded, as I succumbed to a horrifying possibility, I looked around at my classmates, to make sure there was nobody extra I didn't recognize among them, to make sure I wasn't among them. It was a horrifying thought, that the real Keiichi Maibara hadn't overslept and had come to school on time. And that I, who was no longer Keiichi Maibara, had just waltzed in here. But no matter how much I checked, the only people here were ones I knew. The man I met every time I looked in the bathroom mirror was not here.
Hi. 午後の授業を始めますよ。皆さん、席に戻ってください。委員長、号令。
The teacher entered and everyone hurried back to their seats. Upon finding me, who was so stupidly late, she gave me a stern talking to, but I wasn't listening to it. Wasn't our old life supposed to start today? Something just wasn't right. It was just strange. I was supposed to go back to my old, fun life after yesterday. I had set foot in an incomparably mysterious world that was completely different from both my old life and my recent one. Yes, this was, without a doubt, a different world than the one I had been living in until now. There was no way such an absurd thing could be possible. But unless it was true, I couldn't explain anything that had just happened. In this classroom, I was surrounded by so many faces I knew, and yet I felt isolated. The cicadas sounded no different than they had before now, but they seemed somehow false. The air was parched and dry too, making me think Was the air in Hinamizawa always this uncomfortable?
おいレナ、
何かな？授業中なんだよ。
昨日の祭りだけどさ、俺いつ頃みんなと合流したっけ？
To be honest, I was pretty excited afterwards, and I gobbled down some cans of beer. I mean, it's kind of embarrassing, but I don't quite remember some things, you know what I mean? For random babbling, it was not a bad excuse.
ケイチくん、最初は来れないって言ってたんだよね。みーちゃんの家にそう電話したんでしょ？
That matched. I called Mion and told her to take Satsuko in my place since I wouldn't be able to meet up with them due to the things that I had to do.
さとこちゃんを誘ってあげようっていうのは、みんなでお祭りの準備をしてた時に決めたんだよ。少しでもおじさんの姿の見えないところに連れ出してあげようと思って。
That was the same too. Mion said that when I called her, that everyone had already decided to invite her.
それでみんなでレナとみーちゃんとリカちゃんでさとこちゃんの家に行ってさとこちゃんを連れ出して、さとこちゃんのおじさんすっごく意地悪そうな人だった。
That part didn't matter. What I was trying to ask was,
俺はいつ合流したんだ？
そんなことも忘れちゃってるの？ケイチくん、だから祭りの前の日はよく寝た方がいいよって言ったのに。
だから俺はいつ合流したんだよ。
calm down there, murderer. At my sudden threatening demand, Rena was at a loss for words. Oops, I should not have rushed that. I told her I was sorry.
境内でだよ。ひょっこりとリカちゃんと話してたじゃない。
巫女さん姿のリカちゃんと楽しそうに話してた。それでレナも加わって「はお持ち帰り」って。
リカちゃんと話してたのか？
ケイちゃん、用事か何かがあったんじゃないって私が聞いたらさ、ケイちゃん胸を叩きながら自分で言ったじゃないのよ。用事なんかより祭りで大暴れする方が大切だぜって。
I didn't say that. I never said anything like that. I never even went to the shrine grounds yesterday to begin with. I never had the time to stop by a place like that. I went to dig the hole as soon as I woke up. I had a pretty hard time doing it. After that, I snuck into the school and made a call. I called him out and I lay in wait. And then it started raining really hard. With that kind of downpour, the festival should have come to a halt. In other words, it ended then. From the time the festival started to when it ended, it would have been impossible for me to have swung by the shrine grounds. I was already there when Mion and the others dragged Sataka out and brought her to the shrine, and I was talking to Rika-chan. Then, where would Rika-chan say we met? The teacher went out to wash her hands, so I ran over to Rika-chan's desk and asked her directly.
ケイチとですか？
ああ、リカちゃんはミオンたちが来る前から俺と話してたんだろ？いつ俺に会ったんだ？いつどこでだよ？
ケイチが何を聞きたいのか
俺昨日寝不足で半分頭がぼーっとなっててさ、何も覚えてないんだよ。
It looked like Rika-chan bought into my babbling.
ケイチと会ったのは集会所から村長さんたちと出てきた時なのです。ケイチは西宮殿の扉の前にいましたのですよ。
え、何？西宮殿？
I had never heard a building called that before. Or maybe I have, but at the very least, I didn't know where on the shrine grounds it was.
村長さんがそこは神聖な場所だからみだりに近寄ってはならにゅうと怒りましたですよ。
Yeah.
ケイチ、それも忘れてしまいましたですか？
Maybe. I was too scared to ask anymore. The more I asked, the more it became clear without any shadow of a doubt. that quote-unquote Keiichi Maibara was present at foot of the shrine grounds during the Watanagashi festival. The clearer that became, the more doubts, no, fears I had. Who on earth was I yesterday? Whoever that was, he had a good time in my place, and he managed to go the entire day without letting them know I wasn't there. Oh, right. When did that person leave everyone? This morning, my mother got mad at me for having stayed out so late last night, which meant that at the very least that quote-unquote Keiichi Maibara hadn't come home while my mother was still awake. The festival would have been closed because of the downpour. If I recall right, when I went back to the house's storage room to get another shovel, I think the clock said 7. Since it was already raining hard by then, the festival would have had to close down before 7. If I had returned that early, I would have definitely run into my parents. Or, at the very least, they wouldn't have asked me when I got back last night. So, the quote-unquote Keiichi Maibara from yesterday, that meant he never went home. That meant the downpour happened, the festival was broken up, everyone left, but he didn't go back to the house. That means... When I arrived at the natural conclusion, a wicked chill suddenly froze my spine and climbed up to my brain. That meant Keiichi Maibara was the same as Satoshi. One day, he never went home. On the night of Watanagashi, he never went home. The downpour interrupted the festival, and on the way home, he suddenly disappeared. And I, who was dealing with the corpse, went home without a problem. I was so tired I wasn't even hungry, so I went up to my room without a sound and crawled into my futon. Who was I? That much was obvious. Keiichi Maibara. Keiichi Maibara was me. There may have been another one, but that doesn't negate the fact that I was Keiichi Maibara first, damn it. Then, that other Keiichi Maibara was, what, a clone? The voices of the cicadas steadily filling the classroom were beginning to bother me. Suddenly, I laid eyes on Satoko. Satoko's expression was dark as always. She seemed completely exhausted at a life of agony she couldn't even imagine an ending to. What had last night been like for Satoko? Did she have fun with everyone and feel a little happier, if even for a moment? And when she went home, the end of her dream, she had probably gone to sleep afraid of when her uncle would return. And then, this morning, her uncle hadn't come home. And then she went to school. Right now, she must have still been trapped by the rotten idea from which she couldn't be saved, that her uncle would need her when she got back. But you can rest easy, Satoko. Your uncle won't ever be coming back. I couldn't tell her it was because I had killed him. When Satoko realized on her own that her uncle would never ever return, then that would truly be the end of the long, insane night. That's right, I didn't do nothing wrong. I did the best possible thing I could have as Satoko's Nini. Not an atom in my body regretted it. And look, calm down and think, Keiichi Maibara. From a certain point of view, isn't it convenient there was another Keiichi Maibara? I buried the corpse perfectly. A beginning wouldn't happen. I had the perfect alibi. But if worst came to worst and it got out, and the investigation got to me, I now had a strong alibi, able to profess the fact that I had been at the Watanagashi festival. But accepting something so creepy and using it as an alibi. Still, if I proved I hadn't gone to the festival yesterday, it would do no good and do a whole lot of harm. That was what left the really actually bad aftertaste. You will forget about it, Keiichi Maibara. Everything that happened before today. So forget it. Just forget about it. About the Keiichi Maibara who was there yesterday too. Instead, let's watch gently over Satoko, for the day her smile returns. And the day That would mark the end of that insane all too long night.
それでは今日はこれで終わりです。皆さん、寄り道をしないでちゃんとお家へ帰るんですよ。委員長、号令。
起立、気をつけ、礼。
Goodbye! I thought about many things, and I saw my thoughts dispersed by many other things. I didn't know whether or not that time had been spent worrying or daydreaming, but either way, it came to an end along with the class. Cheerfully, our classmates got their things and ran for the hallway. Mion, Rena, and Rika-chan were packing up as well. What about Satoko? This whole day, she seemed deflated. Well, her uncle may not have returned last night, but she wouldn't have known he would never return. How much I wanted to express that fact to her. Satoko packed up her pencil box and math workbook messily, and after a dark glance at the clock, heaved a sigh. Then went to leave the classroom. Then suddenly, somebody placed a hand on her shoulder and stopped her.
何ですの？私、ちゃんと水やり当番もやりましたし、プリントだってちゃんと。
Her words, possessed by a persecution complex, hurt. I spoke loudly so everyone could hear.
なあみんな、さ、今日は久しぶりにやらないか？部活。
Satoko always had to tend to her uncle, so club has been on a hiatus. In our minds, our club was proof of a calm, peaceful life. By enjoying being together, I wanted to make Satoko realize her days of darkness were over.
レナは、いいよ。
そりゃまあ私は構わないけど、さとこがいいならね。
Under a condition. That was important. With everything up to her, Satoko gave a worried look.
なあサトコ、久々にどうだよ？パーッとさ。
お気持ちは嬉しいでございますけど。
My uncle might already be home. Thus spoke her darkened eyes, her mouth unmoving.
サトコもさ、連日息が詰まるような生活をずっと続けててさ、そんなのは心にも体にも悪いだけだぜ。やっぱりたまにはパーッと弾けなきゃな。
放っておいてくださいまし。私だってそりゃ部活がまたやれたらと思っていますわよ。
With one word, but. She looked down.
みんなで遊んだ方が楽しいのはサトコだってよく知ってるだろ。俺たちは仲間だぜ。みんなで一緒に過ごすようにできてるんだよ。サトコだって昨日みんなでお祭りで騒いで楽しかったろ。
Rena nearly said something, but she was too late.
ケイチさん、何を言ってますの？
My arm on her shoulder seemed to weigh her down, and she threw it off.
私がお祭りで楽しく、いつ遊んだって言うんですの？楽しく遊んだのはケイチさんだけじゃありませんの。
I looked over to Mion for help, but now everyone was looking down. My instincts told me that Satoko had not gone to the festival. But Rena said it herself. That she went with Mion to Satoko's house to invite her.
サトコちゃん、途中で帰っちゃったの。神社には行かなかった。
Uh-oh.
どうして？
I realized the absurdity of what I had just said with Satoko right in front of me.
おじが家で待ってるのに一人だけ遊んでると悪いって言って、神社の直前で。
私たちも引き止めたんだよ。今日はおじさん公認だからちゃんと遊んでも怒られないんだよって。
At some point, tears had begun welling up in Satoko's eyes. Satoko was so afraid of her uncle that she couldn't even allow herself time with her friends and went home. No, she was even afraid of letting herself have a good time with her friends.
ケイチさんはいいですわね。 みんなで楽しくお祭り一夜を過ごせて、聞けば大層盛り上がって大活躍だったそうじゃないですの。お羨ましいことですわ。
Smiling to herself, her tears began to fall.
私には養わなければならない叔父がいますの。
Hey, I don't like this sprite.
圭一さんみたいにご両親にのんびり養ってもらってる人とはわけが違いますですのよ。
さとこ。
楽しくお祭りが過ごせてよかったですわね。私の分まで楽しく過ごせて本当におよろしかったですこと。私だって部活がしたいですわ。みんなで楽しく大騒ぎして楽しくて楽しくて。でも今の私、そんなの
Unable to withstand such violent emotion, a few teardrops slid down her cheek. But even though she was having such a terrible time, not once did she ever say that it was hard for her. It was a sad, obstinate bravery. But the days when Satoko had to feel like that were over. Satoko didn't need to endure it, to bear it anymore. She could forget all about it now and smile. I was so frustrated at not being able to tell her that directly. Instead, I said something that I'm not sure I should have said before I thought twice about it.
帰ってこないあいつは。
The words were deeply meaningful to me, but I didn't know if Satoko understood them.
帰ってこないって誰がですの？
ゆうべは帰らなかったんだろ。お前のお家は。
何を言ってますの、圭一さんは。
He never left. Satoko shouted with all her might.
あいつがいついなくなったって言うんですの？いつ？
Oh no.
落ち着けよ。だって昨日あいつは帰ってこなかったろ。
圭一さんが何を言ってるのか全然わかりませんでしたよ。
さとここそ何を言ってんだよ。だってあの男は。
Careful now. I killed him. Killed him yesterday. Killed him for sure. And I buried that motherfucker too. Buried him whole. He could never have returned to his house.
昨日だって私にいっぱい意地悪して怒鳴ってわめいて当たり散らして作ったご飯を投げられた。お味噌汁もひっくり返された。暑かった、汚かった、そしてお掃除も私がした。私が
What? Our stories weren't matching up.
あいついる？
今朝だって朝ごはんの時は起こせって言われたから起こしたのに怒られた。起こさなかったらまた怒るように起こしても怒られた。
さとこ。
Rika-chan went over to Satoko and said a few words of consolation. But Satoko angrily refused those words and thrust Rika-chan away.
いいに
Oh man.
いいに早く帰ってきてよ。
Crying, Satoko slowly walked out into the hallway. After a moment, Rika-chan went after her. I couldn't stop thinking about the words Satoko had spoken while crying. I buried her uncle last night, but she said this morning that was fucking impossible. I buried him last night, so she couldn't have seen her uncle this morning. Fam, who did we bury last night? What was Satoko? At that point, I heard Mion's cold voice.
ねえケイちゃん、サトコのおじさんが帰ってこないって何？
Nothing. I said too much. I let my emotions get the better of me.
レナも聞いたよ。
Nah, y'all must have misheard.
さとこちゃんのおじさんが帰ってこないって言った。
I said that?
どうして？なんで帰ってこないの？
おかしいよね。だって今朝もちゃんとさとこちゃんのおじさんはいるんだよ。なのになんで帰ってこないなんて言うのかな。
ケイちゃん、言ってることがさっきから変。
Suddenly, Mion and Rena started to speak in strange and creepy voices. What were they doing? What were they saying? Oh
ケイち
no.
ゃんはさとこのおじさんがいると何か都合が悪いことでもあるわけ？
お前らこそ何を言ってるんだ。サトコのおじなんかいない方がいいに決まってるだろうが。
それはもちろんいない方がいいよね。
Something wasn't right. The next thing I knew, Mion and Rena were smiling thinly, and their eyes were dark and muddy in a way that I had never seen before. Is that a fact to you? And as our eyes met, that mud even seemed to fill the air.
さとこのおじは確かに嫌なやつだよね。私もいなくなった方がいいやつだと思うよ。でもさ、仕方ないじゃない。
Nothing we can do. Something is wrong. Something is clearly wrong here. What the fuck was happening? After a moment, a chilly liquid-like feeling, as though my blood had been mixed with sherbet, crawled up my spine.
仕方ないって、そりゃ仕方ないけど、でもそれじゃサトコが。
仕方がなければどうするのかな。
Rena was trying to prompt me to say more. There really was no choice, so I killed him. I killed him to protect Satoko.
それは
放っておきなよ。そのうち解決しちゃうと思うしさ。
What makes you say that?
さとこちゃんがおじさんがいるって言ってるんだからいる。ちゃんと昨日もいたし今朝もいる。そうならそうでいいんじゃないかな。
Mion and Rena were speaking unbelievably dismissively. How could they be talking like that? Mion and Rena, they were my friends and were seriously worried about Satoko's abuse, weren't they? They would never blurt out something like this. And I definitely killed Satoko's uncle, let's get that fucking straight. No matter what Satoko or anyone else says, I wouldn't acknowledge it because him being alive was a fucking impossibility, alright? There was no way that he was still alive. It was impossible. And yet, since Satoko herself said he was here, then he was alive. I didn't know why or how, but suddenly, Mion and Rena were at my sides, standing there silently.
帰ろうよ、ケイちゃん。
帰ったらね、今日は久しぶりにレナ宝探しに行くつもりなんだ。みーちゃんも来るんだよ。
ケイちゃんも一緒に行こう。もちろん拒否権はないからね。
Oh god. If words could freeze blood, then there was no doubt that they would have frozen me solid. I could hear it, a strange sound like a layer of thin ice spreading, emanating from every joint in my body. And with them closely at my sides, we left the school as if they were police officers taking me away. They talked about silly things the entire way home, like they always did, but they always stood at my sides as if to prevent me from escaping. This was strange. Everything about this day was strange. Actually, it had been strange ever since the previous night. Yes, thinking back. It had been strange ever since killing Satoko's uncle. That creepy meeting with Takano-san was only the beginning. That insane night was still continuing. Yes, it still hadn't ended.
何？どうしたのケイちゃん。急に立ち止まったりして。
ごめん。なんでもないよ。
When I stopped, it was distant, but I definitely heard them. An extra set of footsteps. That was proof. Proof that insane night hadn't ended. Mion left where she usually did, and finally we came to my house.
じゃあね、ケイチくん。お家で待っててね。レナ、すぐに迎えに行くから。
What was it? She was inviting me along on one of her oversized garbage treasure hunts at the dam site, right? But why now? Mion coming along was strange too. Mion may have accepted Rena's little hobby, but she hated fishing through garbage, so she had never come with her before. And the location specifically being at the dam site was a little creepy. They're taking you out fishing, fam. The dam construction site was completely outside the flow of everyday life. It was so remote that no one ever went there unless they thought to in particular. Nobody lived there and there were no lights, so at night it got dark very quickly. I was being forcibly invited there. There was no reason I had to fear Rena and Mion. You definitely lost the plot, mate. Besides, wouldn't the trouble I would make by refusing them be a pain to deal with? In that way, it didn't seem like going treasure hunting with them was a bad idea. But that insane night was continuing. Haven't the sirens of instinct been wailing in my mind for a while now? Warning me that Rena and Mion were strange? That I needed to be cautious? The warning sirens were so freaking loud it felt like my head would split in two.
あ、レナ、俺、実はちょっと用事があるんだ。
用事？何の？
None of your business, that's what.
なんのって、用事だよ、用事。
用事なら、なんでみーちゃんがいるうちに言ってくれなかったの？
Cause it's none of your business, that's why.
みーちゃんとはダム現場で待ち合わせって言って別れちゃった後なのに。
You spoke for me, that sounds like a you problem, son. Rena was smiling, but her words made her discomfort clear.
ごめん。ちょっと言い出すタイミングを逃しちゃって。
Nah, go mend these nuts. You ain't gotta explain yourself to her.
本当に？
Tony. You're lying, aren't you? You just made that up now, you fucking liar. That's what Rena's eyes said to me.
俺、頭が痛いんだ。風邪かもしれない。だから、病院に行って、薬をもらってきたいんだよ。
本当に？
Tony, crazy bitch. That wasn't really a lie. My head did hurt a little bit, so I wasn't lying. Rena, she couldn't figure out if my head hurt or not, just by looking at it, right?
なら仕方ないね。
I guess so. See ya, bitch. After staring me in the eyes for a few moments, she fired a sharp, needle-like stare at me. Interesting choice of words there, needle-like. The tension in my body loosened and I felt like my knees might buckle.
診療所に行くなら早く行った方がいいと思うよ。あそこたまに早く閉まるから。
Yeah, I might grab a couple of headache pills at home, man. Don't worry about it. I got some Ipren up in here, you know what I mean?
ありがとう。そうするよ。
必ず行くんだよ、病院。
行くよ。
本当に行くんだよ。
行く。
It seemed like Rena had realized that I was going to refuse her invitation for a while now. With how serious she looked, she might actually call the clinic later to make sure I went. I couldn't say anything careless. Lying about getting checked out was just an excuse to decline her request in the first place. It didn't matter whether I actually went.
あ、ちゃんと行くよ。なんなら明日、病院のレシートを持って行ってもいい。
それいいね。
Man, get the fuck out of here. You want the bill. You gonna pay for it?
必ずもらっておいてね。レナ、明日見るから。
Another tingle started crawling up my back. There was no ignoring it. Rena and Mion must have been monitoring my movements. That wasn't normal. Far from it. All of it was insane. I did what I did because I wanted my peaceful life back. But What on earth was all this? It was far from peaceful. Something had gone mad, leaving the world out of order. With the other quote-unquote Keiichi Maibara, with those creepy footsteps I've been hearing, with Rena and Mion acting so curious, and above all, with him being alive, where was I? Hinamizawa village, Shishibone, right? I knew that much? Was this really the Hinamizawa I knew?
おい、前原圭一。ここはどこなんだ？
I asked, whipping around before the front door to face the one who has been following in my wake all day. Nobody would have been there, of course. Keiichi Maibara, huh? That's what I had just called him. Called the one who had been trailing behind me this whole time. That shadowy presence always clinging to me like it was constantly watching for the opportunity to change places. Footsteps always following me was another impossibility. It couldn't have been a ghost, so it was just impossible. So the strangeness must have been my ears, my head, or Hinamizawa. Everything I could see was the same exact Hinamizawa I knew so well, and that gave me the creeps. Eventually, I decided to actually go to the clinic. I really didn't want to go outside, but a stronger feeling than that desire was the fear Rena might actually be keeping an eye on me to see if I went to the hospital. But before I went to the clinic, there was something I wanted to make sure of. It was at school. I pretended I had forgotten something, and was going back to the classroom to pick it up. See if the bat is still there. As soon as the thought crossed my mind, I was overwhelmed by paranoia. I was just going to the classroom, but I hated it so much, having to be so careful to fake it. After carefully verifying once more that nobody was watching, I went over to the locker. Yes, Satoshi's locker. I committed the crime with the bat I found in this locker, officer. This was Satoshi's bat, officer. Like, fam. And then, I had thrown the bat into the swamp, which meant the bat should not have been inside. But, what if? The bat was still in here. It was a very dreadful, incomprehensible idea, but if it was true, it would explain a lot. If the bat was in here, yesterday's events would have all been a delusion. No, an illusion. I hadn't killed anyone, and I had gone to the festival. I had a great time rampaging about with everyone. It would prove that Keiichi Maibara was really me. Proof that I was only under some strange assumption that I had killed Satoko's uncle. Proof that it had all been a wild fantasy. That would explain everything. Nothing happened yesterday. I had just gone mad, unable to separate my shocking uncle-killing dream from reality. That would explain everything. If the bat was here, would I be able to accept that reality? If it was here, nothing will have changed. If it was here, it would just mean that I had gone crazy. Preparing myself for the worst, I opened the locker door. I was actually scared of opening it slowly, so I threw it open with a bang. And just like the first time, the choking scent of smell and sweat, like a stale towel, came flowing out. There was a baseball uniform and some miscellaneous other things like notebooks. There was also a shoe pouch. And as for the bed, it wasn't here. It was how I left it when I took the bat out. There was no doubt. Yesterday really happened. Now that I knew I wasn't a lunatic, I felt relieved. But at the same time, if I wasn't the crazy one, then Hinamizawa surely was. And that was evidence of a reality I found just as difficult to accept. There was noise somehow creeping into everything I saw, and the world was losing a tiny bit of color. So, what didn't I know about last night now, huh? Now that I had made sure the bat wasn't there, I didn't need to be here anymore. Shall I go? For real? To the hospital? It was my first time going to the hospital, but from what I had heard, it wasn't far from school. My mom had told me where it was. A big and easy to see road went straight there. I went past the shopping street and made a turn. It wasn't overly hard to spot the sign with Idiot Clinic written on it. There was one other person, an older man, there in the air-conditioned waiting room. I went up to the counter and told him it was my first time here. The man behind the counter glanced at the clock and said there would be a short wait. It was almost 5. Clinic hours would be ending soon. As I sat in this unfamiliar waiting room, isolated from everyone, and let myself feel the cool air, I actually felt relieved. What should I tell the doctor when he comes? I could tell him I had a cold, but I was the very picture of health. Actually, I wanted him to check my head. I wanted someone to confirm for me whether I was really sane or not.
前原圭一さん、診察室へお入りください。
Huh? The voice came from the other side of the examination curtain. I thought I heard it somewhere before. That's Coach.
こんにちは。
What's up?
ここでお会いするのは初めてですね。
監督ってお医者さんだったんですか？
Still am, you will find. Now that you mention it, he did seem to know his way around when he was looking at my shoulder in the nurse's office. It would make sense if he was actually a doctor. Come to think of it, our teacher had called him Idiot Sensei, didn't she?
一応お医者さんなんかやってい
The
ます。
fuck do you mean, more or less?
お医者さんはいいですよ。若いすべすべなお肌を見放題の触り放題。
I'll show myself out, don't worry about this. This never happened.
怪しいお注射で自由を奪って私だけの専属メイドに。
What?
ありがとうございました。今のを見てただけで風邪が治りました。失礼します。ペコリ。
うわったったった。
No, that, I gotta go. Giottomate, no giottomate.
前原さん。冗談です。さあ座って診察させてください。聴診器を当てますから前原さんのすべすべのお胸を見せてください。
For some reason, I felt really relieved. After that insane night, as much as I thought everything had gone crazy, Coach was here doing the same thing he always did, and I was very happy for that.
風邪ではないようですね。むしろ全身の擦り傷や切り傷の方が痛々しいくらいです。ひょっとして半袖半ズボンで藪の中に入って遊びましたか？切り傷から破傷風菌が入った可能性もないとは言えませんし。
As I was chasing that man last night, I kept being scraped by bits of trees. And you're telling me your clothes didn't have any blood on them? After that whole ordeal? I didn't realize I had so many cuts. I mean, these cuts also verify that you had gone through yesterday's event or last night's event.
昨日のお祭りではしゃぎすぎましたね。
Who are you calling crazy bitch?
若いというのはいいことです。
And once again, I apparently went to the festival.
監督も行ったんですよね、お祭り。
ええ、もちろんですよ。私こう見えても綿流しの実行委員会の役員ですからね。
俺に会いましたか？
This coach was the same coach that I had always known, and I felt like I could trust him more than my weird friend, so I asked. See, that's your mistake right there. You can't trust nobody.
実は私本部テントでずっと会長さんたちとお酒を飲んでたんで全然お祭りは見て回ってないんですよ。
Not even for the offertory dance?
前原さんには会ってないと思います。
そうですか。
変わった質問をしましたね。ひょっとして今日寝不足ですか？
You might say that.
いけませんよ。成長期はよく食べよく寝て育つんですから。
Coach let out a laugh. He didn't laugh in an unnatural way like Mion and Rena did. Coach was aight. He was the coach from the world I knew. He wasn't someone from this abnormal world.
こんな話きっと変だと思うんですけど、笑わないで聞いてほしいんです。
ねえ、どうぞ。思春期のシャイな悩み、大いに歓迎ですよ。
What?
俺と瓜二つな人間がいるなんてありえますか？
Coach hadn't expected that question at all and couldn't say anything for a moment. How about a doppelganger? But then he smiled calmly and quietly answered.
迷信ですが、世界には自分と全く同じ顔をした人があと2人いるなんて話を聞いたことがありますね。いるならぜひお会いしてみたいものですが。あとおとぎ話にも自分の分身が登場する話がいろいろありますよ。ドイツのおとぎ話に出てくるドッペルのお化けなどは有名です。
ドッペルのお化け？
ええ、自分の姿に瓜二つなんだそうです。不幸の前触れなんだそうで、これに遭ってしまうと近いうちに死んでしまうみたいな話らしいですよ。
When you meet them, you're sure to die soon. Well, both of us? How the fuck is it like a game of who spots who first? If I spot him, does he die? The story ended directly in death, plain and simple, and it made my spine tingle. Coach wasn't saying it to scare me though. He was just offering a casual anecdote, but that made it feel all the more
そ
real.
のお化けがHinamizawaに出るなんて話はありますか？
ええ
Bitch, what we say about laughing?
さてどうでしょう。
Coach must have thought he was being teased, so he laughed in an exaggerated way. But when I didn't smile along with him, his laughter steadily grew
すみ
fainter.
ません。ちょっと真面目な話のつもりだったんで。
いえ、こっちこそ笑ってすみませんでした。何か気になることでもおありですか？
I wondered if I should tell him. Then, after resolving myself one final time, I slowly spoke.
俺、昨日はお祭りに行っていないんです。
そうでしたか。お祭りは来年もあります。その時また。
そうじゃなくて、俺は祭りに行っていないのに、みんなが言うには、俺は祭りにいたらしいんですよ。こんなことってあるんですか？
After blinking his eyes in amazement, Coach thought seriously about what I was trying to say. And he answered, choosing his words carefully.
お話を整理しますね。つまり前原くんは綿流しのお祭りに行ったけど、その記憶がないということですか？
You know what? Don't worry about it. Just pretend we didn't ever have this conversation. I'll just show myself out, alright? You have a great day. I was trying to say something completely different, but I suppose any sane person would come to that conclusion. That night, Keiichi Maibara was actually at the festival, but I was saying I didn't go, motherfucker. That obviously meant my memories of going there had failed me. But that was absolutely impossible. That vivid act I had committed during the downpour couldn't possibly have been an illusion. All these scrapes on my body prove it, as does the fact the bat wasn't in the locker.
いえ、違うんです、監督。俺は本当に祭りに行っていないんです。
気を悪くしないでくださいよ、前原さん。前原さんにはこれまでに気づいたら見知らぬ場所にいたとか。
ないです。それに記憶を失ったとかそういうのじゃない。だってその祭りの時間には別の用事を 確かにやっていましたから。
You can't keep a secret for shit, son.
寝てて意識がなかったとかそういうのじゃありません。
その用事は間違いなく、大変失礼ですが、何かの思い込みでなく。
間違いありません。完全にはっきりとした記憶、いや事実です。
お祭りの時間に神社にいなくて、よそで別の用事をしていた。それをはっきりした形で証明できますか？
That's right. Thinking it through brought me to this. There was only one way to prove that I really wasn't at the festival yesterday. And that was to show that there was no doubt I had killed her uncle. Coach saw me struggling to answer and his eyes looked a little cold. I guess they would. After all, from Coach's perspective, I was just a weirdo sputtering nonsense.
少し横になりましょうか。
No, I would in fact not like to lay down, sir.
心を落ち着けて楽にしましょう。
Maybe you should fucking relax!
別に横になりに来たわけじゃありません。遠慮します。
少し神経に高ぶりがあるようです。鎮静剤を注射して少し目をつむってみませんか？それで。
俺は異常者じゃない。
That's the definition of strange, actually. I realized Coach was treating me like a deviant, so I raised my voice.
気に触ったなら謝ります。
Nah, fuck that! I'm asserting dominance in this bitch. Get the fuck away from me, son.
ですからどうか落ち着いて。
Give me your lab coat!
俺は絶対に祭りには行っていない。それは本当に間違いないんです。
分かってます。分かってますから、どうか落ち着いて深呼吸を。
あんたは全然分かっていない。
Coach was stunned and stared in stupefaction.
分かっていますよ、前原さん。
Oh shit.
あなたは昨日はお祭りに来なかった。そうですよね。私は信じますよ。
Coach jotted down a brief note in his records. He was writing it in German, so that his patient wouldn't know what it said. But I could make a good guess as to what he wrote.
あの時間に何をしていたか全部話さないと信じませんか？
いいえ、信じますから。どうか座ってください。
Before I sat, I tilted my head back a little. The blood in my face all drained out and I quieted down. After taking a deep breath, I made sure that I was calm now.
俺が祭りの会場にいることはありえない。なぜなら、その時間に俺は。
Should I tell him or not? I really didn't want to go on living like this, feeling this horrible. Bitch, it hasn't even been 24 hours yet, man. And I said them, the final fatal words.
聡子の王子を殺していたからです。
I could smell the concrete in the room. I could feel the air around us sharpen. Nobody moved. Only the sound of the clock ticking told us time hadn't stopped. With his mouth wide open, Coach even forgot to blink for a little while.
あなたが聡子ちゃんのおじさん？
Did I motherfucking stutter, Coach? Yeah. It's fine now, Keiichi Maibara. Don't hesitate. The cat's out the bag. Admit it with all your strength.
はい、俺が昨日殺しました。
I spoke clearly and fluidly. I could easily tell that Coach's mind had gone completely blank.
どうしてそんなこと？
Cause I motherfucking had to, alright?
いえ、それは愚問ですね。
聡子を救う最も直接的な方法だと考えるに至り、後悔はわずかもありません。
そうですか。
Coach smiled thinly and nodded a bit.
だから俺は祭りの会場にいるわけがないんです。
I left the brightness of my house for the darkness of the outside. After that, I dug holes, made phone calls. I had my hands full. And then I attacked him, killed him, and buried his bitch ass. It was pouring hard at the time. The festival started that evening, but was suspended due to the rain. There were no gaps in my memories. From the late afternoon until it had started to rain, there was no time for me to possibly have gone to the festival.
その体中の傷はその時に。
Yes, sir.
そうです。聡子の家を少し行ったところに、あそこで襲い、逃げるあいつを追い、町に至る一本道で殺すに至りました。
それは本当に。
Killing her uncle. It wasn't some wild fantasy. I could tell that coach didn't believe me, so I spoke slowly, not letting myself grow excited.
本当です。サトシのバットで。そのバットは、あいつが乗ってきたバイクと一緒に沼に捨てました。死体は、殺した場所に穴を掘り埋めました。すべて、自分が一人でやりました。
聡子ちゃんの叔父はバイクで通りかかったんですね。
I never said that.
ではあなたはそれを期待して延々と待ち伏せを。
Did I say that? I didn't say that, did I? Oh wait, you did. I did say that. I ain't paying attention. I said that. I said that. Ah shit, it's not working anymore. Fuck.
あいつが家から出ないことは想定していました。だから電話で適当な嘘を喋って、あいつが出かけるように仕向けました。
電話で呼び出した。でもあなたの家と聡子ちゃんの家は離れています。電話をしてからではとても待ち伏せに間に合わないのでは。
襲撃予定場所から最も近い電話として。
でも前原さん、当日は日曜日です。学校には施錠がされていて入れないのでは。
偶然その時営林署の人が中に出入りしたんです。その隙に入りました。
After that, Coach grilled me on a few different things regarding the incident. He made sure to question me carefully, looking for any contradictions in my account.
信じましょう。あなたが昨日したことは夢とは思えない。
More like a nightmare. I explained everything, including minor details that only someone who had actually committed the act could explain. I could, of course. It was only yesterday. Coach realized that my story had no expedient coincidences or too convenient details that would have existed in a daydream or a delusion, and finally seemed to want to believe me.
これでもまだ俺が記憶をなくして祭り会場に行ったと思いますか？
Coach slowly shook his head.
でもクラスのみんなが昨日確かに俺が祭りにいたと言います。そんなことがありえるでしょうか？
あるわけが。きっとクラスの皆さんはあなたによく似た誰かとあなたを見間違えたのでしょう。それに集団心理が働いて皆さんはあなたがお祭りにいたと錯覚してしまっているに違いありません。
They couldn't have mistaken me. I mean, Rika-chan was speaking to me, right? We were talking. Mion and all the rest said they were spending time with Keiichi Maibara. It was much more than just having mistaken someone else for me. But saying that out loud would just confuse Coach. He spoke to me in whispered tones.
罪の意識はあるんですか？
It didn't sound like he was criticizing me. And even if he had, I would have flatly said the same thing.
ありません。あいつのいなかった平穏な時間を取り戻すために行いました。だから俺はあいつを殺したことなんかさっさと忘れてこれまで通りに生活するつもりです。あいつが現れる前、聡子がいつも見せてくれたあの笑顔が戻った時、ようやく
犯行を誰かに目撃されたということは
ないと思います。目撃されてればもうとっくに逮捕されてるでしょうから。
私は医者です。人の命をだから私から人間の命を奪うことを肯定する旨の発言はできません。だから私はあなたにこう言います。
Coach slowly rose and placed a hand on my shoulder.
聡子ちゃんを救ってくれてありがとう。
Coach's eyes started shedding warm tears. When I looked at him, I started to feel some tears of my own. I didn't know what I was crying for. And so, for a little while, the two men in the room fought back their tears.
でもおかしいんです。
おかしいとは。
確かに殺したはずなのに、あの男は生きて家に帰ったらしいんです。
Coach's expression immediately sharpened.
状況にもよりますが、気絶や仮死状態など素人が見ると死んだようにしか見えない状態もいくつかあります。その可能性は？
脈を取ったわけではありませんが、確実。
前原さんが襲った時の状況を再現してもらってもいいですか？
Coach rolled up a health and fitness week poster nearby and offered it to me to represent the bat. Though I may have been lost to the emotions of a beast that night, I remembered in detail the number of times I swung the bat and the angles I had swung from, and the force I had applied. Using Coach as a stand-in for the uncle, I reproduced them over one by one.
そしてあいつが足を取られてよろめいた時、脳天にこう叩きつけました。その時これまでとは違った手応えがありました。頭蓋骨が割れたんだと思いました。
Coach was calmly analyzing this information, using the places I had struck and the situation at hand to find out what state the uncle's body had been in.
そして死んだかどうか自信が持てなかったので、倒れた後も何度か殴りつけました。
その時の反応は？
初めは殴るたびに体が跳ねるような感じがありましたが、やがてそれもなくなり、何の反応もなくなりました。
Coach folded his arms and said a few times. And then he spoke.
死んでいます。ほぼ間違いなく。
But Satoko said,
それは仮死状態ではなく？
前原さんの話からだけではなかなか判断がつきませんが、それに前原さんは死体を泥の中に埋め、結構な時間をかけて埋めていますよね。仮に30分で埋めたとして、その男は30分間も泥水に沈められていたことになります。それだけの時間、呼吸が止められたら確実に脳死します。
殴った強さ以前に埋める過程で確実に絶命したと？
そういうことです。30分間泥に埋められていて生きていられる人などありえません。
ありえないですよね。でも聡子は生きてると。
Coach, a doctor, just gave his stamp of approval that he was dead for sure. That made it seem all the more unfair that he could still be among the living.
前原さん、これはとても恐ろしい想像なのですが、前原さんが殺した相手が叔父でなく別人である可能性は？
The thought crossed my mind. He's right. That could be why. It cleared up the inconsistency of my definitely having killed someone, but him still being alive.
そんなはずはない。だってほら、監督と一緒に聡子の家の前で酒瓶の袋を運んだ時、窓から顔を出した男がいたじゃないですか。
Could have been one of his friends, or nah.
あいつですよね、聡子の叔父は。
ええ、間違いありませんよ。あの男です。
実はもう一人叔父がいるなんてことは？
聞いたことがありません。あの男だけです。
あいつの特徴を教えてもらえますか？
まず身長がですね、175、もう少しあるかもしれません。
In order to eliminate the worst possibility that I had killed someone else, Coach began to thoroughly compare what the man in his mind looked like with what I told him the person I killed looked like. But no matter how in-depth my description went, none of the characteristics differed. The uncle's traits, according to Coach, were all exactly the same as the person I had killed. But those traits were all extremely vague, and they weren't particularly distinct at a glance.
もっと こう絶対にあいつだと識別できる特徴はありませんか？
そういえば私は見たことありませんが、聡子ちゃんが昔背中に虎だかなんだかの入れ墨があるなんて言っていたような気がします。
So what, he's a Yakuza?
入れ墨。
That was really important. Not everyone had a tattoo. If I found a tiger tattoo on the back of the man's corpse, it would be proof that I had killed the right one. At the moment, though, there was one other thing that would verify this. To go to Satogo's house and see for myself that the uncle had returned home despite having died. But that was far more terrifying than digging up the body and looking at its bag. Even without looking at the tattoo, I knew for sure the one I had killed had been Satogo's uncle. I cracked his head open and killed him. And yet, he had gone back home. There wasn't any misunderstanding or even the shadow of a doubt in my mind about having killed him. And yet, it was impossible for him to exist. Kind of like how Keiichi Maibara had been at the festival despite it being impossible. That small commonality made me think as though a faint but bizarre force was permeating this insane Hinamizawa.
一体どういうことなのでしょう。前原さんはお祭りには行かず、聡子ちゃんのおじさんを殺していたにもかかわらず、お祭りにはあなたがいて、そして殺したはずのおじさんも生きている。
何がなんだかさっぱりわからないです。そうやって整理して言うと、まるで俺が悪い夢を見ていて、実は殺人なんて存在しなかったんじゃないかと思えてしまう。でも事実なんです。この手でバットでガツンガツンと殴ったあの感触は絶対に夢や幻なんかじゃないんです。
Coach let out a slow sigh, then, after looking at the clock, got up.
ちょっとこの話もう少し真剣にやりましょう。ちょっと失礼して紅茶でも入れてきて。
Oh, hell nah. You must think I was born yesterday, motherfucker. No tea. You drink it.
診療所も終わりの時間ですからね。ジムの方とかも返してあげないと。
Coach stood up and went into the hallway, leaving me alone. The clock was about to strike 6. I was at the festival and the uncle I had killed was still alive. What a fucking day. Had I really committed murder yesterday? The only whisper of a fact that proved it had happened was the absence of that bat from Satoshi's locker. In any case, I was glad that Coach had taken my nonsense seriously. I just confessed to murder. Normally, that would frighten a person away. But Coach didn't run. He cried with me. I was glad he did. Like so, my tension smoothly melted away, and I suddenly realized I really had to urinate. I thought to use the restroom while Coach had stepped out. There was one across from the waiting room. As soon as I left the room, I saw Coach and 2 male doctors wearing white clothing standing in the shadows of the hallway nearby. I didn't particularly intend to eavesdrop or anything, but I was quite surprised upon noticing how uneasy they seemed. I hid behind the wall and quietly listened in. It seemed like Coach was giving directions to the 2 doctors.
紅茶ですね。
See, fuck that.
用意します。
Hell no.
睡眠導入剤を入れて種類は任せ
Oh, I'm
ま
about to kill every single one of y'all bitches.
す。味はミルクと砂糖でごまかしてください。
急激な眠気に不信感を抱く可能性もあります。興奮状態に陥って暴れ出す可能性も。
その場合は男性スタッフはまだ何人か残ってますか？
山犬が1人、それに私たちを含めて3人です。
What? What was all this? I think I was already agitated despite what Coach said. What was it? Was it just a casual conversation and it was only sounding unbelievable to me? Coach said he would bring some black tea and left the room. And then, in the shadows, he was telling his subordinates to put some kind of sleeping powder in the motherfucking tea. Plus, they were getting extra help in case I thought the sudden sleepiness was suspicious and started getting violent. Hey, wait, Keiichi Maibara. Calm down, calm down. There's no way something this stupid could be happening. I mean, he was genuinely listening to my story. The motherfucker even cried with me, right? He did that, right? I thought he was the one person in Hinamizawa who would understand. This was... This was...
作り話か虚言の兆候があり、特に昨日の記憶が完全に混乱。虚実の区別の相、多重人格等の精神障害に酷似しています。
You call me a schizo now?
でも、こんな急激な精神障害の発症は普通では考えられません。あるいは先天的、もしくは引っ越し前からそういう兆候があったのか。引っ越し前に精神科に通院例がないか調べたいところです。とにかく前原さんには穏便にお休みいただきます。
The two doctors nodded deeply.
前原さんのご両親にも連絡しておいた方が良いですね。何と言えばいいか。彼の自宅の電話番号を調べてください。
My eyes, still moist, began to shed tears once more. This was too cruel. I really thought he had actually understood and had believed what I had told him. But now, from the other side of that wall, he was bluntly treating me like a crazy person. I believed you. I believed you. I had let down my guard because I thought you were the only ally I had left after that insane night. Was that a fucking lie? All that about thanking me on Satoko's behalf, were you just pretending in order to keep me placated, huh? My tears fell to the floor in frustration. I was an idiot. I was a bakayero. I was such an idiot for believing that bastard. I heard footsteps approaching the doctors. A man in a dress shirt with no tie came running up.
入江先生、大変です。高野さんが見つかりました。
高野さんが一体どこに？
それが山中で焼死体で発見されたらしく。
Interesting.
死んだ？高野さんがですか？
The men, all surprised, exchanged glances. Dead? Takano-san? Hey, wait, so does that mean when I cursed her, wishing for her death, that wish was granted?
焼死とは一体どういうことですか？それは事故ですか？
県警の発表では他殺の可能性が極めて高いと。
As I cried, I laughed quietly. Serves you right, serves you right. If I hadn't run into that woman, my murder would have been perfect. No, it would not have been perfect. The motherfucker's still alive. By that I mean his uncle, her uncle. But she just had to come driving up to me and try to coerce me like that. I regretted not having her killed on the spot, but now she was dead anyway. My curse, my wish for her demise, it was fulfilled. Serves you right. Serves you right, bitch.
リサさんが死に、高野さんが死に。
Who is Risa-san?
一体ひなみ沢には何が起こっているというんですか？
What?
まさかこれが今年のお社様のたたりだなんて言うんじゃないでしょうね。
We haven't met a Risa-san, have we? Like hell I would let the curse be real, Coach said. Everyone present just nodded as Coach cursed at no one in particular. Yes, maybe it wasn't Oyashiro-sama, but this was definitely a spell, a curse. I wished for her to die, so she did. If this wasn't just a coincidence and she died because I wished for it, then you will die next, Coach. You betrayed me, man. You pretended to believe me, but deep down you thought I was a madman. You looked down on me with all that pity in your eyes.
では、とりあえず紅茶の準備を。紅茶は私が持って入ります。私以外には彼は心を許さないようですからね。
Shit. What do I do? What do I do, Keiichi Maibara? Window, get out. This time I heard the voice of a nurse.
入江先生、あ、いらっしゃいました。お電話です。
今ちょっと忙しいので後でかけ直すと伝えてください。誰からです？
沖宮警察の大石様ですけど。
ちゃ悪いタイミングですね。出ます出ます。
Coach left to go answer the phone. The other men headed toward the room with the teapot to make the black tea like Coach had ordered them to. How many motherfuckers do you need to make tea, son? Fortunately, Coach having to take that phone call meant there would be extra time for me to act. I had to decide what to do now. Would I let him make me drink the sedative-infused tea, or be held down and thrown into a mental hospital? Nothing would come from starting a brawl here. They had more people anyway, and they were all bigger than me. If it came to a fight, I didn't stand a chance in hell. If I didn't win against them, then there was only one thing left to do. Run. That's your fight or flight kicking in. Adrenaline suddenly rushed into my brain, and my body started to move with a keen instinct like it had on that night. My surface temperature quickly cooled, and the transmission routes between my cells enlarged. Using 360-degree visual information, I searched for an escape route. I would open the window behind me. Outside was a parking lot. There were no cars. A little beyond there was the bicycle I had taken to get here. I determined that this would be the quickest method of escape. I approached the window swiftly but with little sound to raise as little suspicion as I could. With the speed and silence of a shadow, like I would have had on that night I chased her uncle. See, I wish whenever you say stuff like I wish that you would just write it out, because when I see that, I always go on I had. But it doesn't fit here because it's like I had on that night. Just write out I would, alright? Please, man. Don't use them interchangeably, you're confusing me. You're fucking up my flow. I unlocked the window and opened it up. A cool evening breeze wafted in. I stuck my head out and looked over the parking lot again. Nobody in sight. No need to hesitate. I quietly crawled outside and closed the window behind me. I held my breath and listened carefully. Nobody seemed to realize I had run. I looked around. Then, I jumped onto my bicycle and zoomed away. The pedals clattered under the force. Had my bike always creaked like this? Did the pedals always whine every time I pushed down on them? My bike wasn't the only one crying though. My tears fell as the wind cut through them. They rode the breeze and scattered behind me. I hate this. I hate this. I'm not the crazy one. Hinamizawa is. How dare you treat me like a madman? Die! Shine! Just fucking die already. I believed you. I believed you. Ah! I had gone to the hospital in order to escape Rena and Mia's invitation, but the reality that was waiting for me had been too cruel. Who was insane? Me or Hinamizawa? Or was the answer something else? I started having trouble breathing. I didn't have any clue what was happening anymore. The loud chirps of the Higurashi were irritating me. Or even the Hinamizawa Higurashi I knew so well calling into the wind. Nah, that wasn't quite it. They weren't calling. They were crying. The pained wailing of those lost in some kind of rhythm in another world. Nah, no longer able to return to their own sunlight. I didn't do all that to end up in a world like that. And actually, at about this time, I might have been having fun with everyone else. Satoko would have gotten her smile back after realizing her uncle wouldn't ever come home, and she might have shown it to us at our first club meeting in a while. That was the kind of world I wished for. So what was this, huh? Why did I end up in such a strange, ghastly world? Someone I had killed was living like normal, and I had enjoyed myself at the festival despite not being there. I don't want it. I don't want this strange world. When did it start to go wrong? When? No matter how much I thought about it, I never understood. I rode swiftly and returned to my home. It had begun to rain during my journey back, and just like yesterday, I was now soaked. But I didn't care about something so trivial right now. The pain I felt in my heart that Coach, the one person I trusted, that was your fault, was acting so cruelly was far worse. Did I have no allies in Hinamizawa anymore? With the naive thought that I at least wanted my parents to side with me, I stepped up to the front door. Wait, Keiichi. It'll be dark soon. There is something you want to check, right? Yes. I wanted to dig up the man's corpse and get a look at his back. If there was a tiger tattoo there, I would know beyond a doubt that he was Satoko's uncle. That long night wouldn't end until I was certain. If this insane world was all reparation, all a divine punishment, then I needed to make certain whether I had been successful enough to even deserve to pay that price. I went to the storage room again and got the shovel. It had been washed in the rain, but the paint was peeling, making it look unsightly. I never ever wanted to touch this thing again. The sensation of it in my hands was totally different from the night before. There was a ruthless coldness about it. Yeah. It would be dark soon, so I would need the lantern too. There would be a little bit of light coming from the streetlights, but it would get extremely dark. I thought I put the lantern here, but I suddenly noticed it wasn't anywhere to be found. Then it hit me like a bolt of lightning. Of course, on that night, I hadn't brought the lantern back with me. I left it at the place I buried the body. If I didn't go to get it soon, it would get very dark. And then, not only would I be unable to find the spot I had buried the corpse in, but I wouldn't even be able to find the lantern itself. If that happened, it was all over. In order to fit the shovel in the basket on the front of my bike, I would need to twist it and disassemble it. But it looked like there was dirt in the joints, and no matter how hard I pushed, it didn't want to come apart. After a strenuous effort, I realized I couldn't get it apart, so I decided to hold it in one hand and ride my bike with the other. Not suspicious at all. With the downpour soaking me through and a shovel in one hand, and riding one-handed, it was as if I had returned to that night. No, return was the wrong word. It was more like that night had never ended. The pain of the raindrops striking me were no different from then. The thing that was different was Hinamizawa, the world and nothing else. The rain clouds were already making it dark, and now was about time for the sun to set. I could tell it would only get rapidly darker. The straight road leading to town. In the middle of it, that should be where I buried it. Yeah, it was near that streetlight. On that night too, the water from the downpour was splashing down from the streetlight's overhang like a waterfall. The pouring rain was exactly the same as it had been on that night, and thus, it brought my memories into focus. I left my bike in the brush and stepped into the forest, the ground already soaked with mud. Where had I buried him? Think. The darkness, the shadows, the water, the mud. Everything was the same. Think. And then I spotted the lantern by a fallen moss-covered tree. That's right. I left it right there. If I left the lantern here, then I would have buried him over here. With the sensation of standing in the sludge, my feet remembered the spot better than my eyes did. I plunged my shovel into the ground. It's hard. It wasn't here. I just dug it up, so it should have been softer. I stick my shovel down in a few spots to test what they feel like. One of them clearly felt deeper. I recalled where the lantern was, where the trees and things were in relation to each other, and knew that it had to be here. Under here slept that man's corpse. There would definitely be the tattoo of a tiger on his back. But if it wasn't there, then I had made a horrible mistake and killed someone completely unrelated instead. I would be more dazed at the fact that Satoko's uncle wasn't dead than I would regret having gotten someone else mixed up in this. If this insane world was punishment for the sin of committing murder, I wouldn't be able to accept it until I killed Satoko's uncle for good. And then, without any fear, I would attack him again. And that time, I would kill him for sure. But what if the tattoo was there? That would mean I had killed Satoko's uncle. But that would be terribly strange. If I had killed him for sure, then who was the uncle at Satoko's house this very moment? Impossible. I didn't even know anymore what I was using the word impossible to refer to. I had used the word quite a few times today. If I had to make the words impossible fit just one thing, what would it be? That much was obvious to me.
こんなおかしな世界がありえてたまるかよ。
I shouted, then turned behind me. There was nobody there, of course. It hadn't been bothering me for a while, but those footsteps had followed me this entire day. Even now, an extra set of footsteps had splashed behind me. No one was actually there, no indications of anyone even. But they were there.
あんたは誰だ？俺がこっちの世界に来てからずっとついてくるな。
That's right. Thinking back, the first time I heard those footsteps was after Takano-san and I had parted. Those footsteps were my welcome into this strange inside-out world. No one could be there. I would get no response. Whoever it was, they just kept staring at me. It wasn't ominous, just unpleasant. After staring into empty space for a bit, as I bathed in the rain, my illogical anger slipped away. My tension loosened, and a tired feeling reared its head. I tasted this feeling that night too. The sudden exhaustion I felt as the tension in my brain loosened. My vision quickly narrowed, and I felt like everything around me had suddenly gotten darker. I couldn't give in to this sensation. I would light what little explosives were left in my brain and force myself to keep going. I needed to dig that man up before my stamina ran out. I needed to see the tattoo on his back. I caught my suddenly ragged breath and calmed down. Then, I stuck the shovel into the soft, muddy ground again. It felt exactly the same as that night. The sense of digging a hole in the beach with water coming into it with every wave. What day was today? Had I gone back to the night of Watonagashi? Every strange thought that came into my mind tormented me. Given my exhaustion, I didn't even think I could manage to hold those thoughts back. Once the hole was deep, all illumination finally faded, blanketing my vision in jet black. It was probably the moment the sun had fully set too. That night, I had feared the worst, and gone without using much light. My senses were so strained that I could see even in that darkness. But now, I didn't have that kind of strength left in me. I drained everything I had last night, and now the darkness would be lethal. I decided to turn on the lantern. Putting it on the first setting would make it give off a faint light. Even with how little there was, it was enough, and people wouldn't be able to see it from very far away in this rain. I grabbed the chilled lantern, turned the dial with a click, and set it to the weakest light setting, and turned it on. Fucking hell, bitch. An uncanny world of silhouettes appeared before me. A complex and strange shadowy world, created by the intricate entanglement of trees and branches. I had only turned on a light, and it was like that was all it took to make the world into something else. I let out a quick, tired breath and wiped the liquid, neither rain nor sweat, from my brow. Then, I raised the shovel into the air and slammed it into the mud. That moment, the silhouettes surrounding me ominously all moved at once. Inside my head, something packed in there, something coarse but not hot or cold, was loudly rushing about. The silhouettes were all around me, looking down at me. And one of them, a silhouette bigger than the others, stepped forward. Oh no. Shit.
月の綺麗な晩ですね。
It was. The coarseness in my brain shot through my whole spine and left me at my waist. The strength in my body all left me through my hips, and I crouched down with a splash into the sea of mud I had dug myself.
おいし
目上の人にはその後に3もつけるとなおよろしいかと思いますね。そうでないと大人になってからいろいろと苦労します。
It wasn't only Oishi, but 5 or 6 of them in a row, men wearing raincoats. I had no inkling that this many people had gotten so close. It was like, once I turned on the lantern, they just appeared there, sliding out of the shadows.
どうぞ私たちのことは気にしないでください。森の木立だとでも思って。
Don't mind them.
そうです。私たちのことは気にされず、どうぞ穴掘りをお続けになってください。
You know what? I don't think I will anymore.
こんな時間にこんな土砂降りの中でそんなにも真剣にやっているんですからね。邪魔なんかしませんよ。心ゆくまで掘っちゃってください。
No thank you, I said. When I tried to get up and turn around, 2 men blocked that route. They stood on either side of me and lifted me up with amazing strength, then threw me into the sea of mud. As I soaked in the mud bath I had dug for myself, I looked up at the silhouettes looking down at me. Oishi squatted, picked up my shovel, and threw it at my feet for me. It bounced loudly off the mud and hit me in the face.
ほら、続きをどうぞ。続きを。
I couldn't bear the oppressiveness of the silhouettes surrounding me, and slowly, I stuck the shovel into the mud again. I felt like I was digging my own grave. If I kept digging, it wouldn't matter whether there was a tattoo or not, because that man's corpse would appear eventually. It was all over. Surrounded on all sides and nowhere to go. But I couldn't just figure it out, no matter how much I thought about it. Why were they here? Was it Takano-san? There was only one person who could have made the connection between me and this place. Shit. I knew it. She deserved to die.
手が休んでますよ。
Bam. Oishi kicked me in the back, which took me by surprise, sending me flying into the mud.
ちゃっちゃと掘っちゃってくださいよ。雨の中で待たされる方の身にもなってほしいもんです。
くそ。
Kuso doesn't mean fuck you, right?
そんなに雨が嫌なら帰ればいいだろう。
Oishi kicked some mud into my face.
口より先に手を動かしてください。口と手を一緒に動かすのは落語家だけ。
Right.
ねえ。
The men around him didn't react, not knowing quite whether they should laugh, but when Oishi glared at them, they started mumbling out pained chuckles. Just who was this guy? I knew the world had changed after that night, but if I went even further back, didn't it start when this guy showed up? That was when our peaceful days had been taken from us. Ever since he showed up in Hinamizawa, things had been odd. Everyone stopped smiling and the world went crazy. The ground under my feet gradually got harder and heavier. At this point, even I started to think something was odd. I hadn't buried him this deep on that night, had I? My exhaustion peaked and I sat down on the spot.
いつまで掘ればいいんだよ。
最近の若い人は体力がありませんね。おい。
At Oishi's gesture, the men all pulled out their own sinister-looking shovels. As I watched the daze, one of them grabbed my collar, dragged me out of the hole, and threw me onto the ground. The rest of the men stepped into the hole I dug and started shoveling themselves. As I stared at them, dumbfounded, Oishi sauntered over and squatted down to look at me directly.
前原圭一さん、
Yes?
あなたの趣味は雨の夜の穴掘りですかな？
Yes. When I didn't respond, Oishi took one of the tin buckets they were using to bail out the muddy water, scooped up some of it, and splashed the whole thing in my face.
今日は大雨ですから、これ以上いくら濡れても全然わかりませんね。
Oishi smiled to himself, then scooped up another bucket full of muddy water.
もう一回聞きますよ。あなたの趣味は雨の夜の穴掘りですかな？
そんな趣味のやついるもんか。
Splash! Oishi hit me with another bucket full of muddy water. The pebbles in it stung.
あの穴を掘ると何が出てくるんですかな？私、花坂じいさんのここ掘れワンワンってのが昔から憧れでしてね。
As he spoke, he ran the bucket through the muddy water again, to splash it in my face again.
あそこにどんな宝物が埋まってるんですかね？私にちょっとだけでも教えてくれませんか？
If you wanna know, then dig on your own time. You fucking pig! I wasn't saying that out loud, but Oishi mercilessly drenched me in muddy water again anyway. Shit, shit, shit! If only you hadn't showed up. The world wouldn't have gone so wrong. Ever since you showed up, things have been strange. Satoko got abused by her uncle, I ended up killing him, and the world went crazy. He was how it all began. Because of this fucking culprit right here. He splashed another bucket of mud into my face. My insides were seething with anger. Die. You die too. If I have some strange power to kill someone by cursing them, like with Takana-san, then you're dead. And it won't be Oyashiro-sama's curse, it'll be mine. I will curse you and kill you.
反抗的な目つきですね。これを機に少しそのあたりをお勉強してしまいましょうか。今は平和な時代ですがね、私があなたくらいだった頃は何でも鉄拳制裁が普通でして。
おいさ。
One of the digging men in raincoats wiped some sweat off and called Oishi over. Oishi tossed the bucket away and then turned around with an evil grin on his face.
はいはい、なんで。
これを見てください。
Acceptance, or maybe resignation. I wanted to say to them, so your blockheads finally found it. Yeah, that's right. I'm the one who killed him. But you're the police, so it's your own job to figure out who he is, right? Go on. Prove to me that he's really Satoko's uncle.
なんですかこれ。
多分古い排水管ではないかと。あそこの用水路に繋がっているようです。
ぶっ壊しちゃいましょうか。
What?
どうせ使ってない缶でしょ。
The men all exchanged glances, then hesitantly broached another topic.
おいさ、もうかなり手応えが固いです。これより深くってことはありえないと思います。
掘る場所を間違えました。
いえ、初めのうちは明らかに掘り返す感触でした。ですが、このくらいを掘った頃から急に硬くなりまして、多分もともと掘った穴よりも深く掘り進んだのだと思います。
じゃあつまり何ですか。ここには穴があって何もなく ただそのまま埋め直されたと皆さんそうおっしゃるわけで。
What? What were they talking about?
こりゃ参ったな。ねえ前原さん。
Oishi grabbed my collar and dragged me to the huge hole they dug. The mud inside was like an ocean, and I couldn't see any drain pipe down there. One of the men stirred it with a shovel, letting me hear it clang against something hard. There was no doubt I had buried him right here. But I hadn't buried him this deep. I didn't dig deep enough to unearth an entire drain pipe. So, then, this man, his corpse, where was it? Proof that I had been successful on that night was gone. Gone. It was gone. Then, what on earth was I? Was I actually crazy after all, and just possessed by the delusion that I had killed someone? That couldn't be. It was the unmistakable truth. It could not have been a hallucination. But now, the most important evidence that it hadn't been an illusion was gone. I killed him. I buried him. I had absolute, unwavering confidence in that fact. Then, did I fail to kill him? After I left here and he started breathing again, crawled out, and gone back to Satoko's house? Was that it? I had come here to see whether he had a tattoo or not. And yet, the truth I unearthed was far more than that. Yesterday, what was I? I killed him. I buried him. There was no doubt. But for some reason, he lived and crawled back out. And that was impossible too. I'm so tired of hearing the word impossible over and over. I get it. Listen, I get it. Dead people don't like to play by the rules here in Hinamizawa. Then I will kill you as many times as I need to. I will keep killing you until you never show your face to Satoko again. Oishi and the others were muttering to each other. Eventually, their conversation ended and Oishi came towards me. What did he want to say? What did he want to do? I stiffened, tensing up, and then Oishi just ignored me like I wasn't even there and passed right by me. The other men too. They ignored me and shuffled away. Eventually, there was no longer a sign that anyone was around, and I returned to my quiet world of silhouettes. The only one left there was me. Only the sound of the pouring rain filled up the silence. Okinomiya Police Station Command Center Transmission Recording, June 20th, 8:08 p.m.
こちら沖宮 PS 感度良好です。
車両ナンバー紹介をお願いします。獅子骨歯の4344。
副将獅子骨歯の4344。少々お時間もらえますがよろしいですか？
お願いします。
Number match. Shishibone H-4344. Owner. Address. Hinamizawa Village, Shishibone. Vehicle make and model. Theft reports, none. Special mentions, nothing of note.
沖宮 PS より大石社どうぞ。先ほどのナンバーが判明しました。大石社どうぞ。大石社応答願います。あれ？大石社応答願。
大石さんが車両紹介？誰の車だよ。
村人の車ですね。至って平凡な。
何者だよ。大石さんが聞いてくるからにはただものじゃないんだろ。
突起事項欄は完全に空欄ですね。S 号指定もなし。 減点もなしだし。
バッシングでもされて腹が立ったんじゃないの？あの人、根に持つとなかなか忘れないタイプなんだよ。
He said it smelled. He said the food smelled. He said it smelled because I smelled. He said I smelled because I don't take baths. He said to take a bath 3 times a day because I was a smelly person. He said I had to stay in the bath for a very long time every time. He must be possessed by something too. This is the same thing the man who died said. Huh? Why does he know what that man said before? That much is obvious. The same thing that possessed that man is now possessing him. Can't a sudden earthquake make a big hole in front of the house? If it did, he would definitely go and look into it, and then I would just have to push him in. I won't give in until I get that chance. I won't give in, I won't cry. I won't give in, I won't cry. Someone is apologizing again. Interesting. But with that, we are going to call it an episode. I hope you guys enjoy this one. I'll see you guys next episode. I'm out of here, man. Love y'all and deuces.